What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the Division 3. I want to talk about if it's a possibility to come out. I want to talk about when we would maybe see it. I want to talk about basically what I think it should be, the kind of fixes I think Ubisoft needs to make to this game, the changes in order to make this game a success. Now, this is coming off the last video where I talked about the sales numbers for the Division 2. Now, we learned a lot about the sales numbers, not necessarily specifics, but we learned enough to know that the game seems to not be selling as well as the Division 1. We know from the UK numbers, we've heard that the US numbers are down as well, so there's a lot of things that are being floated out there that this game is not doing very well. And again, the question that I had in that video was, well, what's the expectation to Ubisoft? What does Ubisoft think of these numbers? Did Ubisoft expect these numbers to go down because of all the kind of warning signs with the first division? What did they really expect from the second division? That's all on Ubisoft, and that obviously impacts whether or not we get the Division 3. And, that's a tough question. I think Ubisoft is generally pretty good with knowing the games that they have and knowing, if they can continue them and knowing that there needs to be changes. Assassin's Creed was one of the biggest examples and one of the most, applaudable moments of Ubisoft was the fact that, yes, they obviously beat that game into the ground and they would come out and it would just be a buggy mess. And the more games that came out in that franchise, in my opinion, the quality did drop a little bit. I know people did like things about Unity. I know Syndicate was overall a pretty solid game, but to me, the Assassin's Creed franchise kind of lost all of its steam after Assassin's Creed Revelations. That was the last good game in my mind. And then, after that, they took the year off. They didn't do the annualization. They didn't do the 1 year new Assassin's Creed game. And then they came back, and it was completely, I think, fixed and very much changed. It's not the same Assassin's Creed game, but obviously Origins and Odyssey have taken the franchise in such a different direction, but a really good direction, and people really love those games now. So Ubisoft, with that franchise, with their biggest franchise, in terms of what you know them for, in terms of the most games in a actual franchise with Assassin's Creed, I think they've proven, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, that they do know what they're doing, and they know kind of what it takes to make a good game, the balancing and kind of taking your time. With a Division, it's tough because the Division 2, one of the major things talked about with the Division 2 was that it was very, very similar to the first Division. There's a lot of things that the game, I think, overall does look a lot better, but it feels a lot the same with the Division 1. Obviously, the end game content is something they focused on, so they made improvements, that's for sure. But did it actually push numbers? Did it push people to buy the second Division? From what we're seeing, it did not as much as maybe they would expect. So when it comes to the Division 3, I think this is still a franchise that Ubisoft wants to continue. It's interesting because I always thought we would be getting a For Honor 2 by now, because For Honor I thought was a major, major franchise. Ubisoft put a lot into that. It sold extremely well. It had a lot of the same problems as the first Division game, which we talked about, people jumping in and then leaving very, very early in the game's life cycle. And then, since then, we've just gotten updates and season passes, kind of marching fire and all that stuff to For Honor. And we haven't gotten a For Honor 2 yet. I think that could eventually happen, but the Division obviously was so good and it sold well enough and people liked it enough that they pushed the Division 2 out. Will they say, hey, this is still a major, major franchise for us. We need the Division 3. And I think that's going to happen. My answer would be yes, I think we're going to get the Division 3. I think that is very, very possible. And, they took their time. It feels like a shorter period of time since the last Division. It felt like it only came out like 2 years ago, but it actually has been 3 years, which is pretty good. That's kind of a normal life cycle for what you see for, I was about to say most, but like Call of Duty games, things like that, Assassin's Creed in the past, and even this past 2 years when we got Origins and Odyssey, we have games that are annualized, we have games that are every year, sports games are yearly, but 3 years is about the norm. It's about a AAA kind of game length. 3 to 5 years, I'd say, is a huge, huge AAA game that's not the annualization kind of thing. Maybe it's a game like a Sony exclusive or a Microsoft exclusive. It normally takes that amount of time. So, the process of development, the development process of the Division 2 seemed pretty normal, and I think that's good. I think there's definitely been enough time in between the first and second Division, and I would expect if we were to get the third Division, I think they wouldn't rush it. And, the only reason I would say that is because they didn't rush the second one. one. If they would have rushed this, if this would have came out a year after the first division, then we'd be talking about, annualization, getting these out once a year. But the problem with these games, and specifically what the division is, the kind of the way the shooting mechanics, the Destiny kind of clone game, which it's not. It's a lot different than Destiny, but there's mechanics there that are like Destiny, like Anthem, like other games for sure. You can't really do that every single year. The annualization of that is definitely hard, and I don't think there's the interest to jump back into that yearly. Assassin's Creed is a little bit different. There are reasons to jump back into that year after year because it's a different setting, different characters, different mechanics. For the Division, it's not really that kind of game. It just isn't. There's not much more to say. It's just not that kind of game. You need a fair amount of time in between the games to kind of reinvigorate people and say, okay, I'm ready to jump back into a game that I know is very familiar. I'm sure this game will be very familiar. Oh, but they fixed this, and that. They tweaked this, they added this. Those are the things that people need to see for the next Division. I think in order to do that, you need to give them multiple years. So I do think the Division 3 would happen, and I would put a bet on it and say that I think it would come out in around 3 years. I don't think they would rush it. I don't think it would come out in 1 to 2 years. And I don't think if it came out 4, 5, 6 years away, that's a long time. And especially in this day and age when more and more publishers are pushing to have games come out yearly or every 2 years, that live service kind of thing. And Ubisoft does the live service thing. I don't think you can wait 4 or 5 years because the interest, I do think, drops. It's the same thing with movies and a franchise. You can't have 4, 5, 6 years in between movies. The interest will drop off. It's some level, may not drop off drastically, but it will drop. So those are my opinions. Let me know in the comments below, guys. What do you think about the Division 3? Do you think we'll ever get it? What would you want to see from it? And when do you think it would come out? Let me know. Make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel, Podcast Now. Hit the bell icon so you guys are notified when all these videos go up. And thank you, as always, for watching these videos. I hope to see you on the next one.